Great Britain, also known as Britannia, ʻbrɪ.tən, is a large island in the North Atlantic Ocean off the northwest coast of continental Europe, with an area of 209,331 square kilometers. It is the largest island of Europe and the ninth largest in the world. In 2011, the island had a population of about 61 million people, making it the world's third most populous island, after Java in Indonesia and Honshu in Japan. The island is the largest in the British Isles archipelago, which also includes the island of Ireland to its west and over 1,000 smaller surrounding islands. The island is dominated by a maritime climate with quite narrow temperature differences between seasons. Politically, the island is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, constituting most of its territory. Most of England, Scotland, and Wales are on the island, with the respective capital cities, London, Edinburgh, and Cardiff. The term Great Britain often extends to include surrounding islands that form part of England, Scotland, and Wales. A single kingdom of Great Britain resulted from the union of Scotland and England in 1707. More than 100 years before, in 1603, King James VI, King of Scots, had inherited the throne of England, but it was not until 1707 that the parliaments of the two countries agreed to form a political union. In 1801, Great Britain united with the neighbouring Kingdom of Ireland, forming the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, which was renamed the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland after the Irish Free State seceded in 1922. Terminology. Toponymy. The archipelago has been referred to by a single name for over 2,000 years. The term British Isles derives from terms used by classical geographers to describe this island group. By 50 BC, Greek geographers were using equivalents of Britannic as a collective name for the British Isles. However, with the Roman conquest of Britain, the Latin term Britannia was used for the island of Great Britain, and later Roman-occupied Britain south of Caledonia. The earliest known name for Great Britain is Albion or Insula Albionum, from either the Latin albus meaning white or the island of the Albiones, first mentioned in the Massaliote Periplus in the 6th century BC, and by Pytheas. The oldest mention of terms related to Great Britain was by Aristotle, or possibly by Pseudo-Aristotle, in his text on the Universe, Volume 3. To quote his works, there are two very large islands in it, called the British Isles, Albion and Ion. Pliny the Elder, in his natural history records of Great Britain, its former name was Albion, but at a later period, all the islands, of which we shall just now briefly make mention, were included under the name of Britanniae. The Greco-Egyptian scientist Claudius Ptolemy distinguished Great Britain from neighbouring Ireland as Little Britain in his work Almagest. In his later work, Geography, he gave these islands the names Alwan, Ewernia, and Mona, suggesting these may have been names of the individual islands not known to him at the time of writing Almagest. The name Albion appears to have fallen out of use sometime after the Roman conquest of Great Britain, after which Britain became the more commonplace name for the island called Great Britain. The name Britain descends from the Latin name for Britain, Britannia, a Britannia, the land of the Britons, Old French Bretagne and Middle English Bretagne, Bretine. The French form replaced the Old English ɓrɪ.tən, Brighton, Breton. Britannia was used by the Romans from the 1st century BC for the British Isles taken together. It is derived from the travel writings of the ancient Greek Pytheas around 320 BC, which described various islands in the North Atlantic as far north as Thule. Martian of Heraclea, in his Periplus Maris Exteri, described the island island group as Alpha Pi Rho Epsilon Tau Tau Alpha Nu Iota Kappa Alpha Nu Sigma Omicron Iota. The peoples of these islands of Britannic were called the Pi Rho Epsilon Tau Tau Alpha Nu Omicron Iota Prytani or Prytani. Prytani is the source of the Welsh language term Prydain, Britain, which has the same source as the Goidelic term Crudni used to refer to the early Brythonic-speaking inhabitants of Ireland. The latter were later called Picts or Caledonians by the Romans. Derivation of Great. The Greco-Egyptian scientist Ptolemy referred to the larger island as Great Britain and to Ireland as Little Britain in his work Almagest. In his later work, Geography, he gave these islands the names Alwan, Iwernia, and Mona, suggesting these may have been names of the individual islands not known to him at the time of writing Almagest. The name Albion appears to have fallen out of use sometime after the Roman conquest of Great Britain, after which Britain became the more commonplace name for the island called Great Britain. After the Anglo-Saxon period, Britain was used as a historical term only. Geoffrey of Monmouth in his pseudo-historical Historia Regum Britanniae refers to the island of Great Britain as Britannia Major, to distinguish it from Britannia Minor, the continental region which approximates to modern Brittany, which had been settled in the 5th and 6th centuries by Celtic immigrants from the British Isles. The term Great Britain was first used officially in 1474, in the instrument drawing up the proposal for remarriage between Cecily, the daughter of Edward IV of England, and James, the son of James III of Scotland, which described it as this noble isle, called Great Britannia. As noted above, it was used again in 1604, when King James VI and I styled himself King of Great Britain, France and Ireland. Modern use of the term Great Britain. Great Britain refers geographically to the island of Great Britain, politically to England, Scotland and Wales in combination. However, it is sometimes used loosely to refer to the whole of the United Kingdom. The term Britain, as opposed to Great Britain, has been used to mean the United Kingdom formally. For example, in official government yearbooks between 1975 and 2001. Since 2002, however, the yearbooks have only used the term United Kingdom. GB and GB are used instead of UK in some international codes to refer to the United Kingdom, including the Universal Postal Union, international sports teams, NATO, the International Organization for Standardization country codes ISO 3166-2 and ISO 3166-1 Alpha 3, and international license plate codes. On the Internet, UK is the country code top-level domain for the United Kingdom. A GB top-level domain was used to a limited extent, but is now obsolete because the domain name registrar will not take new registrations. In the Olympics, Team GB is used by the British Olympic Association to represent the Great Britain and Northern Ireland Olympic team. The British Grand Prix of motor racing is another example of a use of Britain in place of the United Kingdom. Political definition. Politically, Great Britain refers to the whole of England, Scotland and Wales in combination, but not Northern Ireland. It includes islands, such as the Isle of Wight, Anglesey, the Isles of Scilly, the Hebrides and the island groups of Orkney and Shetland, that are part of England, Wales, or Scotland. It does not include the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands, which are self-governing dependent territories. The political union that joined the kingdoms of England and Scotland happened in 1707 when the Acts of Union ratified the 1706 Treaty of Union and merged the parliaments of the two nations, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain, which covered the entire island. Before this, a personal union had existed between these two countries since the 1603 union of the crowns under James VI of Scotland and I of England. History. prehistoric period, the island was first inhabited by people who crossed over the land bridge from the European mainland. Human footprints have been found from over 800,000 years ago in Norfolk, and traces of early humans have been found from some 500,000 years ago, and modern humans from about 30,000 years ago. Until about 14,000 years ago, Great Britain was connected to Ireland, and as recently as 8,000 years ago it retained a land connection to the continent, with an area of mostly low marshland joining it to what are now Denmark and the Netherlands. In Cheddar Gorge, near Bristol, the remains of animal species native to mainland Europe, such as antelopes, brown bears, and wild horses, have been found alongside a human skeleton, Cheddar Man, dated to about 7150 BC. Thus, animals and humans must have moved between mainland Europe and Great Britain via a crossing. Great Britain became an island at the end of the last glacial period, when sea levels rose due to the combination of melting glaciers and the subsequent isostatic rebound of the crust. Great Britain's Iron Age inhabitants, so known as Britons, they spoke Celtic languages. Roman and medieval period, the Romans conquered most of the island, and this became the ancient Roman province of Britannia. In the course of the 500 years after the Roman Empire fell, the Britons of the south and east of the island were assimilated or displaced by invading Germanic tribes. At about the same time, Gaelic tribes from Ireland invaded the northwest, absorbing both the Picts and Britons of northern Britain, eventually forming the Kingdom of Scotland in the 9th century. The southeast of Scotland was colonised by the Angles and formed, until 1018, a part of the Kingdom of Northumbria. Ultimately, the population of southeast Britain came to be referred to as the English people, so named after the Angles. Germanic speakers referred to Britons as Welsh. This term came to be applied exclusively to the inhabitants of what is now Wales, but it also survives in names such as Wallace and in the second syllable of Cornwall. Cymru, a name the Britons used to describe themselves, is similarly restricted in modern Welsh to people from Wales, but also survives in English in the place name of Cumbria. The Britons living in the areas now known as Wales, Cumbria, and Cornwall were not assimilated by the Germanic tribes, a fact reflected in the survival of Celtic languages in these areas into more recent times. At the time of the Germanic invasion of southern Britain, many Britons emigrated to the area now known as Brittany, where Breton, a Celtic language closely related to Welsh and Cornish and descended from the language of the emigrants, is still spoken. In the 9th century, a series of Danish assaults on northern English kingdoms led to them coming under Danish control. In the 10th century, however, all the English kingdoms were unified under one ruler as the Kingdom of England, when the last constituent kingdom, Northumbria, submitted to Edgar in 959. In 1066, England was conquered by the Normans, who introduced a Norman-speaking administration that was eventually assimilated. Wales came under Anglo-Norman control in 1282, and was officially annexed to England in the 16th century. Early modern period. On the 20th of October 1604, King James, who had succeeded separately to the two thrones of England and Scotland, proclaimed himself King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. When James died in 1625 and the Privy Council of England was drafting the proclamation of the new king, Charles I, a Scottish peer, Thomas Erskine, 1st Earl of Kelly, succeeded in insisting that it use the phrase King of Great Britain, which James had preferred. rather than King of Scotland and England. While that title was also used by some of James's successors, England and Scotland each remained legally separate countries, each with its own parliament, until 1707, when each parliament passed an Act of Union to ratify the Treaty of Union that had been agreed the previous year. This created a single kingdom out of two, with a single parliament, with effect from the 1st of May 1707. The Treaty of Union specified the name of the new all-island state as Great Britain, while describing it as one kingdom and the United Kingdom. To most historians, therefore, the all-island state that existed between 1707 and 1800 is Great Britain, or the Kingdom of Great Britain. Geography. Great Britain lies on the European continental shelf, part of the Eurasian plate, situated off the northwest coast of continental Europe. It is separated from the mainland by the North Sea and by the English Channel, which narrows to 34 kilometers at the Straits of Dover. It stretches over about 10 degrees of latitude on its longer north-south axis and occupies an area of 209,331 square kilometers, excluding the smaller surrounding islands. The North Channel, Irish Sea, St. George's Channel and Celtic Sea separate the island from the island of Ireland to its west. The island is physically connected with continental Europe via the Channel Tunnel, the longest undersea rail tunnel in the world, completed in 1993. The island is marked by low, rolling countryside in the east and south, while hills and mountains predominate in the western and northern regions. It is surrounded by over 1,000 smaller islands and islets. The greatest distance between 2 points is 968.0 kilometers, 838 miles by road. The English Channel is thought to have been created between 450,000 and 180,000 years ago by two catastrophic glacial lake outburst floods caused by the breaching of the Wheeled Artois anticline, a ridge that held back a large preglacial lake, now submerged under the North Sea, around 10,000 years ago. During the Devensian glaciation, with its lower sea level, Great Britain was not an island, but an upland region of continental northwestern Europe, lying partially underneath the Eurasian ice sheet. The sea level was about 120 meters lower than today, and the bed of the North Sea was dry and acted as a land bridge, now known as Doggerland, to the continent. It is generally thought that her sea levels gradually rose after the end of the last glacial period of the current ice age. Doggerland became submerged beneath the North Sea, cutting off what was previously the British peninsula from the European mainland by around 6500 BC. Geology. Great Britain has been subject to a variety of plate tectonic processes over a very extended period of time. Changing latitude and sea levels have been important factors in the nature of sedimentary sequences, while successive continental collisions have affected its geological structure, with major faulting and folding being a legacy of each orogeny, often associated with volcanic activity and the metamorphism of existing rock sequences. As a result of this eventful geological history, the island shows a rich variety of landscapes. The oldest rocks in Great Britain are the Lewis and Gneiss, metamorphic rocks found in the far northwest of the island and in the Hebrides, which date from at least 2,700 ma. South of the Gneisses are a complex mixture of rocks forming the Northwest Highlands and Grampian Highlands in Scotland. These are essentially the remains of folded sedimentary rocks that were deposited between 1,000 ma and 670 ma over the gneiss on what was then the floor of the Iapetus Ocean. At the present time, the north of the island is rising as a result of the weight of Devonian ice being lifted. Southern and eastern Britain is sinking, generally estimated at 1 mm per year, with the London area sinking at double the speed, partly due to the continuing compaction of the recent clay deposits. Fauna-animal diversity is modest, as a result of factors including the island's small land area, the relatively recent age of the habitats developed since the last glacial period, and the island's physical separation from continental Europe, and the effects of seasonal variability. Great Britain also experienced early industrialization and is subject to continuing urbanization, which have contributed towards the overall loss of species. A DEFRA study from 2006 suggested that 100 species have become extinct in the UK during the 20th century, about 100 times the background extinction rate. However, some species, such as the brown rat, red fox, and introduced grey squirrel, are well adapted to urban areas. Rodents make up 40% of the mammal species. These include squirrels, mice, voles, rats, and the recently reintroduced European beaver. There is also an abundance of rabbits, hares, hedgehogs, shrews, moles, and several species of bat. Carnivorous mammals include the fox, badger, otter, weasel, stoat, and elusive wildcat. Various species of seal, whale, and dolphin are found on or around British shores and coastlines. The largest land-based wild animals today are deer. The red deer is the largest species, with roe deer and fallow deer also prominent. The latter was introduced by the Normans. Sika deer and two more species of smaller deer, muntjac and Chinese water deer, have been introduced. Muntjac becoming widespread in England and parts of Wales, while Chinese water deer are restricted mainly to East Anglia. Habitat loss has affected many species. Extinct large mammals include the brown bear, grey wolf, and wild boar. The latter has had a limited reintroduction in recent times. There is a wealth of birdlife, 583 species in total, of which 258 breed on the island or remain during winter. Because of its mild winters for its latitude, Great Britain hosts important numbers of many wintering species, particularly ducks, geese, and swans. Other well-known bird species include the golden eagle, grey heron, kingfisher, pigeon, sparrow, pheasant, partridge, and various species of crow, finch, gull, auk, grouse, owl, and falcon. There are 6 species of reptile on the island, 3 snakes and 3 lizards, including the legless slow worm. One snake, the adder, is venomous but rarely deadly. Amphibians present are frogs, toads, and newts. Flora in a similar sense to fauna, and for similar reasons. The flora is impoverished compared to that of continental Europe. The flora comprises 3,354 vascular plant species, of which 2,297 are native and 1,057 have been introduced. The island has a wide variety of trees, including native species of birch, beech, ash, hawthorn, elm, oak, yew, pine, cherry, and apple. Other trees have been naturalized, introduced especially from other parts of Europe and North America. Introduced trees include several varieties of pine, chestnut, maple, spruce, sycamore, and fir, as well as cherry, plum, and pear trees. The tallest species of the Douglas firs, 2 specimens have been recorded measuring 65 meters at 212 feet. The Fortingall yew in Perthshire is the oldest tree in Europe. There are at least 1,500 different species of wildflower. Some 107 species are particularly rare or vulnerable and are protected by the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. It is illegal to uproot any wildflowers without the landowner's permission. A vote in 2002 nominated various wildflowers to represent specific counties. These include red poppies, bluebells, daisies, daffodils, rosemary, gorse, iris, ivy, mint, orchids, brambles, thistles, buttercups, primrose, thyme, tulips, violets, cowslip, heather, and many more. There are also many species of algae and mosses across the island. Fungi. There are many species of fungi including lichen-forming species, and the microbiota is less poorly known than in many other parts of the world. The most recent checklist of Basidiomycota, published in 2005, accepts over 3,600 species. The most recent checklist of Ascomycota, published in 1985, accepts another 5,100 species. These two lists did not include conadial fungi or any of the other main fungal groups. The number of fungal species known very probably exceeds 10,000. There is widespread agreement among mycologists that many others are yet to be discovered.